My name is Rahina Muazu. I'm from Nigeria. Currently, I have a one-year research project here at Dubnow, and I'll be working on women trafficking from Nigeria to Europe. The project is funded by Fritz Steppat Prize and hosted here, as I mentioned, at Dubnow. My training began with traditional Islamic studies at a madrasa in Nigeria. And my field studies are Islamic studies and anthropology. The title of the dissertation is Qur'an Recitation and the Nudity of the Female Voice in Nigeria. And I conducted the research in Nigeria, but also at FU, at the Freie Universität, supervised by Professor Birgit Kravitz and Professor Hans-Jörg Delga. So the research is on Qur'an recitation and female reciters in Nigeria, and it looked at the debate surrounding female voice, whether or not it's part of her nudity and should be covered. And covering the voice here means taking the voice out of the public space. So at the beginning of this debate in Nigeria, which started, I could say, like in 1990s, the debate on whether or not the female voice forms part of her nudity, there were several platforms that were taking the female voice into the public space. And one of the major platforms were Qur'an competition. And I was one of those voices. I was a small girl participating and reciting at those competitions, and suddenly a Muslim group called Izala banned their female. It's a very influential group with millions of followers, not only in Nigeria, but in neighboring West African countries. So they banned their female reciters from participating in those public competitions. And I could say that my attempt to understand the effect of that ban on female reciters like myself, on Muslim women and the society in general led me to conducting the research. I had a hypothesis, and it is that so I stated that, or I imagined at that point that if like we'll only, I mean in northern Nigeria or also possibly also other countries or Muslim minority and majority countries will only continue to have a rising number of female reciters if women are allowed to recite publicly. And what I find interesting is that I had this hypothesis years before I thought I could even conduct the research, because I thought of how, as a girl participating back then at the competitions, how the competition enabled me and other female reciters to have mobility, to move from one place to another, to travel, but to also have our voices travel with us, sometimes even farther than us, to spaces that we never imagined we could go, and how it also enabled us to have economic gains, to build social networks. So I was thinking of all those like benefits, and which served as a kind of incentives that motivated us to do more. So then that's like the idea I had, sort of like a hypothesis that if women are not allowed to recite publicly, then like this, the culture of memorization and recitation by women will not be vibrant. And together with the hypothesis, I argued that the understanding of the position of the female voice in Qur'an recitation as a practice of piety directly affects the understanding of the position of the voice in non-religious activities, such as newscasting, for instance. I conducted field research for 15 months from 2015 to 2016. And I also conducted a short, another few months field research in 2018. But actually the research is not based just on those like almost 2 years of field work, but also on my experiences in as a reciter myself, as someone from the culture, not only from the Hausa, northern Nigerian culture, but also from the culture of recitation itself. The research gave me the opportunity to test my hypothesis and to also support it. Like I assumed earlier that that going public with their voices will motivate female reciters to do more. So that's actually what I found out. But it also led to it brought out other important developments, such as which I didn't see before, such as the role of social media, particularly Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp, in making the female voice more public. The main thing which I see it's very interesting is the connection between the understanding of the female voice in recitation and expected women's social roles. Like many people see recitation as a Qur'an recitation just as a practice of piety, but then even within the society they are unaware of how that practice determines what a woman should do or not do in public space, whether or not, for instance, a woman should or could or should be allowed to, let's say, read a news on radio, TV, give a public speech, participate actively in the society with her voice, then that is related to how her voice within recitation is understood. During my field work, I always remember the people's generosity and kindness, but because also the Hausa people where I come from, they are not used to Hausa female researchers. So I also experienced, or I was faced with strange questions, if I could call them, especially while interviewing elderly male scholars. Or people generally, elderly male people there, and I was asked questions like, how old are you married, or who gave you the permission to study abroad? So for me, that was pointing to the gender dynamics in field working, particularly because I know many male researchers, and I know that they don't face this kind of things. Yeah, so maybe that's something I often remember and really I find interesting.
My name is Shaul Marmari, and I am a PhD student at the Dubnow Institute for Jewish History and Culture in Leipzig. My current PhD project deals with the migration of Middle Eastern Jews across the Indian Ocean during the modern period, 19th and 20th centuries. The title of my MA thesis was Red Sea Horizons, Palestine and the Jewish-Yemeni Diaspora from 1881 to 1948. I wrote it during my master's of global history in Berlin under the supervision of Professor Ulrike Freitag of the ZMO and the supervision of Sebastian Conrad from the Global History Program. I arrived at this topic completely by accident. I was working on actually the activity of Israeli government firms at the Red Sea in the 1950s and 60s, so quite a different topic. And during this work, I came across the names of local Jews of Yemeni descent living in places like Asmara or Addis Ababa, and my first reaction, I was very surprised to learn this, and my first reaction was, what were these people doing in those places, those Yemeni Jews? How did they end up in Asmara or in Addis Ababa? After a short research, I learned that actually Yemeni Jews migrated from the late 19th century to many destinations across the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, from Bombay to Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Egypt. and they formed these small migrant communities with synagogues and with communal institutions, and really formed this interconnected Jewish-Yemeni diaspora. What I tried to do in my thesis was actually to juxtapose these migrations to these various destinations, Bombay, Somalia, Eritrea, and Egypt, with the phenomenon that I knew, which was, or that every Israeli knows, which is the aliyah of Yemeni Jews from Yemen to Palestine and later to Israel. So Jewish-Yemeni history is very much shaped in this narrative of this mythical return of Jews to Zion. And everybody knows this story, how Yemeni Jews, since the late 19th century, decided to leave their homes in Yemen and increasingly made aliyah, so to speak, to Zion, until the entire community, the entire Jewish population, or almost the entire Jewish population of Yemen, settled down in Israel in the 50s. It struck me that actually at the same time that Yemeni Jews made aliyah to Israel, they also migrated to these many other destinations, and I wanted to explore these two phenomena, these two movements, and to compare them and see, are they really so different and separate, or are there more complicated relations between them? My sources were mainly Hebrew memoirs or travelogues, either written by Yemeni Jews themselves who migrated, traveled, or just recorded their life in Yemen or in the diaspora. Travelogues by various travelers, mostly Jews, because they were more sensible to seeing fellow Jews in the diaspora. But also colonial sources, from documents from colonial archives, and family documents from family archives, specifically the archive of the Hibshush family, that is now kept at the National Library in Israel. I think my findings kind of complicate the story that we know about Aliyah of Jews from Yemen, and it shows that actually, or the findings show that Aliyah, the two movements, the movement of Jews from Yemen to Palestine, to Zion, and to other destinations were not so different as we might think. They were actually putting aside the special spiritual place that Zion holds in the Jewish-Yemeni mind. Actually, both movements were very much driven by material reasons, both the reasons or the motivations to emigrate from Yemen and the choice of destination were actually determined very much by these very even prosaic reasons. So where we can have better life, where we can have livelihood, protection, even physically, where can we arrive with steamer lines or with railroads. And also, I think the findings challenged a bit this narrative of one unidirectional or linear movement from Yemen to Palestine, to Zion, showing or demonstrating actually a much messier kind of movement. So the paper shows, or the thesis shows, that Yemeni immigrants could settle in Palestine in Tel Aviv and then decide to move to Egypt or to return to Yemen or to move to Asmara or commute between Alexandria and Jerusalem or in all kinds of various routes and constellations. And yeah, so the main argument or the main argument was that Yemeni Jews were presented, at least at the time, with a broad horizon of possibilities, where to go, where to live, how to live, and there was no strong telos, as we might think, towards Zion, at least at the beginning. This changes, of course, as other scholars have shown, with the increasing involvement of Zionist organizations that directed or channeled the migration from Yemen really in the direction of Zion, of Palestine. There's this anecdote that even in my home city in Tel Aviv, I was surprised to find out that wealthy Jewish-Yemeni families erected monuments, built synagogues and other buildings, owned properties, and all of this with profits that they made trading in the Red Sea. The common image is that Tel Aviv, for example, or the State of Israel, or the Jewish Yishuv in Palestine, was built by Jewish immigrants from Europe, by European immigrants, by European Jews. And by focusing on these wealthy merchants, non-European merchants, we also see their part in building the country, so to say.